so that we can start on time and end on time, right? So,
That's right.
good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight for our first Natural Average PD session for spring of 2026. I just want to welcome everyone and also remind you that the session is being recorded to be shared on our YouTube channel. My name's Carrie Horton. I'm the program manager for the Kenan Fellows program for teacher leadership at NC State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. I taught high school English for 20 years before taking on this role with KFP, and I am a 2012-2013 Kenan Fellow alumni. At KFP, we are investing in teachers and strengthening communities. We believe that North Carolina's future depends on educators and on sustained support for their leadership across the state. We invest in educators through immersive experiences to build strong, enduring community and expertise they can bring into their daily practice. Teachers lead communities. And we know that when teachers are empowered as leaders and connected to real-world experiences, they can create powerful learning opportunities for their students. Across our 25-year history, we've built a network of 680 wildly talented alumni. Through Natural Average PD, we are tapping into this amazing talent to bring professional development to teachers from teachers. If you want to learn more about our programming, you can visit our website at www.kenanfellows.org, and I'm going to paste that into the chat. And tonight, we have one of these amazing, talented Kenan Fellow alumni who is quite the expert on both AI and feedback. Paul Cancellieri is a 2011-2012 Kenan Fellow alumni and National Board Certified Middle School Science teacher. He is currently teaching at Mills Park Middle School in Cary, North Carolina. And leveraging his 23 years of classroom experience and a passion for impactful integration of EdTech, Paul has written 2 books, the latest being 50 AI Prompts for Teachers. He provides engaging professional development experiences to teachers all over the United States, and we are honored to have him joining us tonight to share his expertise with us. So welcome, Paul. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Carrie. I do want to start by saying that one of the reasons why I love events like this is a chance to connect with other educators. And one of the reasons why this particular topic is so important to me is exactly what Carrie mentioned. You know, my passions lie in the grading and feedback area, but also in ed tech. And the thought of using AI tools to help with feedback and grading, it means that this sits right in the middle of that Venn diagram that is my life. And so I am really excited to be here. So without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. I hope if you haven't been to a Kenan Fellows event of any kind in the past, I hope you're prepared to do some work because we're going to be learning together. And as somebody famous once said, the person doing the talking and the person doing the work is the one doing the learning. And I want all of us to be learning today. So I hope that you'll use the chat to contribute to our discussion tonight. And if you have questions, feel free to ask them when you have them, and we'll answer them as we find time to do that throughout today's presentation. So again, my name is Paul Cancellieri, and to kick things off, I'm going to ask you to answer a really kind of straightforward question. When you see this image, this picture of this stack of papers and these red pens on a desk, what's the feeling that comes to mind? And you can use one word, you can use an emoji, maybe keep it G-rated, but go ahead and tell us how you feel when you see this image. I love how diverse these answers are, but I'm afraid at how much I can align with all of them, right? The feeling of being anxious and overwhelmed, grading until you retire, Vossi, man, that hits me, right? I know exactly what you mean. And I love the idea of defeated, right? That this is a sign that something's wrong, right? When you have this much grading in front of you, there's probably something you could be doing differently or better. And Heather, the crying emoji, that captures it, doesn't it? So thank you all for those contributions. I share the way you feel. This is not an actual picture from my house because I do a lot of digital work, but I feel like in my head, I still have that stack of work that I have to complete. There's nothing like logging into Canvas sometimes and just seeing that I have 100 or 200 things I have to grade and how overwhelming that can be. But another aspect of this issue, this problem, is what happens once you've done the grading and you've handed the work back to students. So I'm going to ask you to respond to another question now. In your classroom, when you hand back graded work, what's the next thing that usually happens? Whether it's something that you do, whether it's something the students do, what's the thing that happens in your classroom once you hand back a graded assignment, for good or not? Heather, I love to hear that corrections are part of the story there. As somebody who's passionate about feedback, I always envision that my feedback ends up leading to improvement in student work, but unfortunately, sometimes that's not the case. Yeah, and Shannon, I can align with the idea of some students asking you how they can improve, right? But Mary and Stephen, I think that in my classroom, more often than not, what you're describing is exactly what happens. This idea that the students see the grade as the end of the process, right? For so many students, that's what happens. They put it in their backpack or their notebook where it usually gets buried, even if it's a good grade. And that's the last of it, right? But if I think about that too much when I'm in the process of grading, it kind of breaks my heart because I'm leaving what I think are really impactful messages to students about how they can improve. I'm telling them exactly where I see room for improvement. I'm trying to be encouraging. I'm trying to be motivating. And to see all of that feedback end up with a grade that they don't really pay any attention to, or at least the feedback they don't pay attention to, and to see it end up at the bottom of a backpack means that somewhere along the line, that cycle of feedback that we know is so important to student learning, that it's not happening like it should. And there are lots of folks that have written lots of books about grading that get to the heart of this problem. I'm going to share one particular quote that comes from Josh Eiler, who's written a pretty recent book that I recommend, especially if, like me, you get frustrated with traditional grades. I'm going to give you a moment to read this quote. And I'm going to ask you to use a thumbs up or a thumbs down, either in the chat or in Zoom, to let me know whether you agree or disagree with this quote. Do you feel like this lines up with the way you're thinking? Yeah, I see some thumbs up. Don't be afraid to disagree, though, for sure. I know that when I am faced with having to give students grades, and I know that the true purpose of grades is to communicate learning, but yet there's so many other things getting in the way such that they don't actually work very well at their primary job. That kind of feels like I'm losing something with grades, right? Now, with that said, we know that grades are not going away, at least anytime soon. They're an integral part of the system that all of us have to work in, whether you're a public school teacher, charter, private. We all have this requirement that we have to give grades. And oftentimes that means you have to give a letter grade or a numerical grade. And we know that these problems exist because over time we have attached so many different things, so many different purposes to grades. Yeah, and that's a great point. The idea of the grade aligning to a rubric, I think that does help a lot. But there's still this issue that, like, many of our students are focused on grades because it's how they get to continue on the path they're on, how they get to participate in sports, how they unlock opportunities for scholarships and, higher education. I think in a lot of ways, the grade ends up becoming this weighty object that it's really hard for us to get around. It's sort of like the elephant in the room that makes it hard for us to get any meaningful education to happen. So let's talk about why giving high quality feedback might be a better alternative. And then we'll talk about some ways that that feedback might be made easier. So when we talk about high quality feedback, we're talking about feedback that actually pushes students to pay close attention to it and to act on it. So why is that an improvement? Well, first, good quality feedback always pushes students to iterate. We know as adults that that iterative process of making changes, evaluating those changes, making more changes, that's how improvement happens. But yet students often don't see that as a process. Many of the students I teach as a middle school teacher, many of them see the process as I give them an assignment, they do one thing, I give them a grade, and we move on. Now, I don't teach writing, and I do know that English language arts is a subject area where iteration is part of the game. But I really wish it was more of the game in my classroom as well. I wish my students understood that I want them to improve and show that improvement for a lot of reasons. Another thing that high quality feedback can do for us is build our students' confidence. There's a lot of research out there that shows that when grades are working at their best, they don't just measure student learning, but they also promote confidence in our students. But that's not how a lot of folks see grades, and they don't see that as an important role of grades. But I think it's hard to avoid the fact that good feedback definitely builds confidence among our students. We want them to not just know how they can improve, but to feel that they have the power to improve. When students don't feel like they have that power, that they're capable of learning and improving, we've lost them. They're no longer motivated to participate in what we're doing in our classrooms. Good quality feedback also takes away some of that baggage that we just talked about, right? Good quality feedback is not connected with whether or not you can play sports. Good quality feedback is not something that makes your parents take away some of your privileges at home. And Mary, I love that idea, and I've used it myself in class, the idea of giving feedback, but not the grade initially, so that they're forced to focus on that feedback. Yeah, it's a great idea. The last thing that I really want to make clear about feedback over grades is that it is personalizable. You're able to make it personal for every student in a way that a letter grade really can't be. You know, if I've got 3 students in my room that are earning a B, oftentimes they're earning Bs for 3 different reasons. You know, one of them maybe works really hard, gets work done on time, but makes a few mistakes. Another one has mastered some of the knowledge, but not all of it, and that's why they have a B. And sad to say, but in some cases, a student might get a B in my class without doing any of the day-to-day practice work, but just doing really well on the tests. So that B isn't really personalized. It doesn't really give them information that's unique to them. And one of the most critical ways that we can build their confidence is by making our feedback personalized. When students feel like you're speaking to them and not just to a large group of students, they're going to be more likely to act on that feedback. So if we know that feedback can be so much better than grades, the real question is, why don't we provide high quality feedback all the time? Now, we could spend forever talking about this. I could, put a question in the chat right now, but I'm not going to, because I think we're all going to arrive at some of the same answers, right? And to me, those answers all boil down to time and energy. We have so much on our plates as educators these days. They keep adding more onto what we're responsible for, but they don't give us more time to do it. And in fact, in many cases, as our curricula get larger, as the standards get bigger, we have less and less time to do the things that might be more meaningful to our students, like high quality feedback. So if what's holding us back from doing more feedback with our students is time, right? Because if I give feedback and I want you to act on it, that's extending the current assignment. Whereas if I just give you a grade and we move on, we're able to dive into the next topic. If time is the limiter, then maybe there are some ways that we can enhance the time that we already have. And so here are our goals for the rest of this hour that we're going to spend together. First, we'll make sure that you can all explain why we need to give more high quality feedback. Second, I want to make sure that you learn how AI tools can help you to personalize feedback. And third, even though we're adding in technology, I want you to understand how that technology can actually enhance the human connection that we make with our students. Now, I would argue that we've already tackled the first one, so let's go ahead and dive into the other two. We're going to do that at the same time. Before we can talk about how AI can improve the way we give feedback, we need to really define what good feedback is. So I'm going to give you a definition that comes from my own work. It comes out of a book I wrote back in 2017 with a good friend of mine that's called Creating a Culture of Feedback. But it comes from solid research that's been done for decades. First, good quality feedback needs to be in small enough chunks that students can attack it. If you give a student back feedback on an entire essay, and you give them tons of different things to improve, they're going to be overwhelmed. So one of the most important things that we can do is make sure that the feedback that we offer is in chunks that are appropriate for the age of kids that we teach and the kinds of difficulties that our students might have. When I'm working with a student that struggles to read, I might give them smaller pieces of feedback to work on, rather than my more advanced or academically gifted students who might be ready to tackle more feedback at once. The more you know about your students, the more you can give them the right amount of feedback for them. But the bottom line is it needs to happen in small pieces and frequently. That frequency is what helps build this as a habit for your students. Before long, they're going to start looking for the feedback, asking for it because they expect it. The second element of good quality feedback is that it shouldn't just be passive for students. I try to make the feedback that I give students a bit of a challenge. Dylan William, who has written a lot about feedback, has said that feedback should be like detective work. It should be more work for the receiver than it was for the giver. And there are lots of ways that you can do this. For example, at the end of any feedback I give to my students, I always ask them a question so that they feel like this is a conversation that hasn't just ended. Sometimes I'll tell my students how many errors they've made, but I won't identify exactly what those errors are. Then my students are motivated to go back and find those mistakes. The key here is the more they grapple with the feedback, the more of that productive struggle that happens inside their head, the more the effects of the feedback will stick with them. And the third aspect of good quality feedback is maybe the most important one. We have to provide them feedback in a way that allows them to act on it. To be honest, if you give a student feedback on a summative assignment and there's no way for them to apply that feedback, at least in the short term, you might have wasted your time, because if they can't act on the feedback, they can't turn that iteration into a process that builds their learning. So it's important that when you take the time to give feedback, you also give the students some sort of opportunity to act on that feedback. It might be a reflection on that assignment where they describe what they could do differently. It might be a reattempt at the same assignment or a new draft of a writing piece that they've done. Or sometimes I'll just walk around the room while students are getting their feedback, either on paper or digitally, and I'll just ask them, tap them on the shoulder and say, Bobby, you saw that feedback. If you had a chance to do it over again, what would you do differently? And by having them voice how they would act on that feedback, even if they don't get the chance to redo the assignment, forces them to think about what it would look like to actually act on the feedback that I've given them. Okay, so you've heard all of these different tips, these different aspects or parts of good feedback. But if you're like me, you teach a lot of kids and you give a lot of assignments. This can really feel overwhelming, right? How do you personalize feedback? How do you maximize its effect? And how do you do it for 150 different assignments? Well, there are lots of great answers to this question, and I'm sure some of you have some great ideas that I hope you'll share as we go through this. I'm going to touch on one piece, because just like I like to give my students bite-sized feedback, I want us to grab onto one small practice that we can adopt by the end of this hour that you can go forward with when you leave here. And that one practice is the use of comment banks. So for those of you unfamiliar with them, a comment bank is just a collection of snippets of feedback that you can give to students. You might give them one snippet, or you might put together multiple snippets to create a piece of feedback for them. Now, you might be wondering, how can a collection, a bank of comments be personalized? And what it boils down to is you're choosing just the right bits of feedback for that student. So they're each getting their own unique combination of items from the comment bank. Sometimes I like to think of it like a salad bar. They might all have the same salad bar, but they're going to pick different items from that salad bar to make their salad. And I'm going to give each student a unique collection of these comments. Now, comment banks can be handled in a lot of different ways. Obviously, digitally is probably the easiest option. And if you're working with Canvas or Blackboard or Moodle or another LMS, you can use the comment bank feature that's built in. So that built-in form of comment bank can be really helpful. If you don't know how to use it, I know there are lots of help menus out there to help you decipher it. I sometimes will use the comment banks that are in Canvas. And you can add lots of items to them, and then you can open up the bank and click on the ones you want to give to a particular student on a particular assignment. But I'm going to make the case for a little bit different idea that may work better for some of you, or maybe not. It's definitely worth at least exploring. And that idea is to open up a digital document, a Google Doc or something like that, maybe a Word document, and putting your feedback snippets, your comment bank, into that document so that you can copy and paste from it as you see fit. Now, we're going to talk about some ways to level up that comment bank, but I just want to start with the idea that the comment bank should live someplace where you can copy and paste from it. So why go with a Google Doc instead of just using a comment bank feature that's built into a tool like Canvas or Moodle or one of those other LMSs? Well, first of all, no matter where you're grading, you can copy and paste your comments. If you're grading a student's digital document, like a Word document or a Google Doc, you can copy and paste right into there. If you're using your LMS, you can copy and paste into there as well. I find that the Google document can be a little bit more of a universal tool because once you have your comments there, you can reuse them for multiple assignments if they're appropriate, or you can customize the comment bank for each particular type of assignment that you give, like a writing assignment versus some sort of worksheet. Lots of different assignments might call for lots of different comment banks, but they can start with a common core. And maybe the single most important reason to create a common comment bank in a Google Doc is that if you work on a team, a professional learning team, or a group of teachers that you collaborate with, you can collaborate on your comment bank. I mean, a good PLC is always going to be aligning their grading anyway. Why not align your feedback and share the workload of building this comment bank so that you don't have to do it all by yourself? And once you have this shared document, you know the kids are going to be hearing the same kind of really impactful language from everybody that they get feedback from. And the last reason why a Google Doc can be really helpful is it's really easy to get some AI tools to help you within that Google Doc. Now, as soon as I mention AI, and I do it a lot, and I speak to lots of groups of teachers about how AI can make our jobs a little bit easier, there's a very common reply that I get, which is really well-founded. This one actually comes from a good friend and coworker of mine in the past. She said to me, but Paul, like, feedback's the most important thing I do as a teacher, right? That's the core of our job as a teacher, is to tell students what they can do better. That's what teaching is. And if I use AI to give feedback, I've given up that most important role that I have as a teacher. And that is a valid concern, right? In a world where we might start to feel like our jobs might be taken over by AI down the road, although I personally don't see that happening anytime soon, I'd love to see an AI try to do lunch duty. I think that's where we'd lose Skynet. It would just disappear. Forget about the Matrix. If you can't make students sit and not throw food, forget about it. But more importantly, that human connection is so important to the way students learn. And the research has shown over and over again that if you're not building those relationships and getting to know students on a personal level, then they're not going to be fully engaged in the learning. So if you let AI get between you and your students, you're on the wrong path. But that doesn't mean that you can't use AI as a way to help you to do that kind of connecting with your students. Let's take a look at some examples of tasks that we might do and think about which ones the AI might do for us and which ones we really need to hang on to ourselves. So on the human side, you can see building relationships, right? That's something that's a human thing that really has to be our role. I also think it's extremely important, and many districts have a policy that makes this required, that when it comes to determining a student's grade, that is a uniquely human task. Only the teacher should be doing that. And then, of course, one of the best things that you can do once you start to lean on AI to help you is get more time for that small group intervention, helping those kids that need a more personal touch, who need to get to talk to you in a small group or one-on-one to really connect with the ideas they're struggling with. That can be really hard to do if, like me, you have a class of 35 kids. But if 34 of them are able to get their feedback and act on it so that you can work with that one, even for a few minutes, that's a win. So then where can the AI step in? Well, AI is great at writing text. And so having the AI help draft some of the statements that you give to students, of course, you're going to look over those drafts, but having it come up with the starting language can be really, really effective. If you're struggling to understand how to give feedback that students can actually act on, how to actually improve your feedback practice, you can brainstorm with AI tools and they can give you some great advice. Now, they might give you 5 ideas and only one of them is one you would actually use, but that's still one idea you didn't have before that. And this is another place where AI can really excel. If you tell the AI about how you're giving feedback right now and the struggles that you're having, it can make suggestions for how you can improve those areas. So I'd love to hear in the chat if there are any of these strategies that any of you have already used AI to help you with. Go ahead and let us know. Awesome. So Shannon's used it to help come up with comments. That's great. And Trisha's used it for brainstorming. That's one of my favorite strategies, actually. Rob, I love that you've used Brisk. We're going to talk more about Brisk later on. It is one of the simplest tools for giving students feedback. Yeah. Yeah, I love the idea, Shannon, of using that spreadsheet or Google Doc as a place to put the comments and organize them. I'm not really much of an organizer, but I know a lot of people who love organizing, color coding, all that good stuff. And an AI can definitely help generate them, and then you can organize them. So let's talk about something that comes up anytime we discuss AI, which is, okay, I use AI for some things. I use my own teacher brain for other things. How do I know if I'm crossing a line or doing too much of relying on AI? Well, here are some great guidelines, no matter what you're using AI for as a teacher, that'll help keep you on the right side of that line. First, you've probably heard this phrase before, maybe not, the idea of a human in the loop. At no point should the AI be directly interacting with your students without you having your eyes on what's going on and an understanding of where things are happening. We're going to talk in a little bit about some ways that students might interact directly with AI, but when that's happening, I'm always in the room, walking around, checking in with my students, because I never want them to see the AI as a replacement for me. Maybe they can see it as a teacher assistant, and that'd be like a more appropriate way to think about it. You should always be the final evaluator of student work. So whether it's determining a grade or just determining which students have mastered the content, you might get advice from AI, but in the end, you should be the one making that call. Not only are we the most qualified ones, but that is such an integral part of our jobs. And to be perfectly honest, it's our legal responsibility. So we should always be the ones making the final call. You should also never share personal identifying information about your students with an AI tool unless you've got strict permission from your district. It's true that most AI tools, unless the permissions have been turned off, are going to use the inputs they get from you to help train future models. And that means anything you put in that little chat box could end up being used in ways that you can't control. And that's a violation of our students' privacy, which is one of the most sacrosanct things that we hold as teachers. It is true that there are enterprise level or educational level tools that don't do this and that have levels of encryption that make the data privacy much safer. But I, for one, would never want to be on the wrong side of a legal issue like this, let alone an ethical issue. So whenever possible, I try to avoid putting any kind of identifying information about students into one of these tools. And in the end, I like to ask the question anytime I'm using AI, is this tool helping me be a better teacher? Or is it taking over some of my responsibility in a way that's not improving my practice? If I'm using it as a tool to improve, then that's a valid use. If I'm simply handing off or outsourcing work to it, I don't really feel like that's a valid use of AI. Somebody said to me once at a training I did a few weeks ago that she likes to ask her high school students to think of two different scenarios. One is a construction site where the workers use tools to help them do their job better. And the other is a gym where people use tools to help build their bodies and make them stronger. In one, the goal of the tool is to make your job easier. In the other, the goal of going to that location is to work hard. And so if you used motorized equipment at a gym, you wouldn't be helping yourself at all. You want the work. The friction is the point when we're learning. And so when it comes to me being a better teacher or my students enhancing their skills, I never want to take away that friction. All right. I've been talking for a while. I want us to get a chance to practice this. So the next thing I'm going to share with you is a piece of feedback that is flawed, okay? It's not horrible. It's definitely the kind of feedback that I myself have given in the past, but it's got some places where it could be better. I'm going to show you this feedback, and then I'm going to give you a chance to use a custom tool that I've created to get advice from an AI tool on how to improve this feedback, on how to make it more bite-sized, how to make it more actionable, how to make students grapple with it. So I'm going to put it on the screen, but you don't have to type it out because we're just going to put in the chat a link to a Google Doc that has this block of text in it. So first, I'm going to ask you to either, if you really prefer, you can open up your own favorite AI chatbot, ChatGPT, Gemini, maybe Claude, whatever you prefer to use. Or if you'd rather take my tool for a test drive, you can go to the link that you see on the screen that'll show up in the chat here in just a sec. By going there, you're going to access a Gemini tool, a custom chatbot that I've created. Gemini calls them gems. And I've already fed it information about what makes for good feedback. And all you have to do is give it the sample of student work and the sample of teacher feedback and ask it how to improve. So if you click on the first link, you can get what's in that white box and you can paste it into the second link, which is where you can get advice on how to make it better. So you're going to enter the example and you're going to ask it to make the feedback better, make it more bite-sized, more sticky, or make students grapple with it, or make it more actionable. And then I'd like you to take whatever you get out of that AI tool and share it with us in the chat. Now, if you've got some other feedback that you want to improve and you'd rather play around with your own starting text, that's fine. But I wanted to give you something that you could play around with for a little bit, and we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to stop talking for a few minutes, give you a chance to do this, ask questions if you're struggling, and put your output in the chat. All right. So Rob shared with us his feedback from the AI. And I like how the AI sort of acted like a coach, kind of starting off with that sandwich method of giving you some praise. I know that some people hate when AI is overly sycophantic, but my ego has plenty of room for some praise. I will take some praise wherever I can get it. And then Shannon used the gem that I provided and again, got some praise at the beginning. Part of that is because I've instructed it to be a coach that helps boost your confidence while you're working. And in both cases, the feedback seems to be asking for more specificity from the students, right? And I like that there's a common thread there through all of these examples. Carrie got a whole lot back from hers. I love how in Carrie's, they actually broke it up into categories, gave them like catchy names. Carrie, did you use the gem or your own?
I
The
use
gem?
your gem.
Interesting. I like that it explains why the student should make the change. It says that scientific readers need to know exactly what happened. Sometimes students need to understand the why, right? And especially, I have found my strongest students, their immediate reaction to constructive feedback is that I'm wrong and they're right. And it can soften the blow if you can tell them why, while it was a good start, there's room to improve. I love that Trisha's feedback included specific instructions, right? Tell the students to revise it, right? And that's a missing piece that I often make this mistake. I tell the student, here's where you didn't do a great job, but I don't say to them, now make it better. And it may seem like that's obvious, right? They should know that their next step should be to make it better. But I don't know. A lot of students, if you don't specifically tell them that, they're not going to act on it. Now, some of you may prefer feedback where you tell the students explicitly what to change, and others of you, depending on the students that you teach in your subject area, you may prefer to give students general directions, a little nudge, and put them in the driver's seat of making those decisions. It really depends on your own students, right? And not even all your students would need the exact same kind of feedback. Fantastic. Heather got like full on bullet points. I love that. And I love the idea that in Heather's, it told her where to look in her work to find the information that she needed. So it's that detective work, sending the student on a little bit of a mission to find what they need to add. That's really cool. So Shannon asks, how did you make the gem? And that is a great question. And what I'm going to suggest is if you all would like, I'm going to show you behind the scenes of a different gem in a little bit. But if any of you would like any of these gems, I can send you links that allow you to copy them, modify them. And I'll be happy at the end of our presentation tonight to show you how I created them. Great. Mary got very similar language, actually. It's funny that the AI tools sometimes will reuse some of the same text. Awesome. All right, we're going to keep going. Now that you've seen an example of how AI tools can take one piece of feedback and improve it, let's talk about some of the other ways that we can use these AI tools to make things different. So here are 3 other ways that I use AI tools in my feedback work. The first one is by aligning the comments that I'm giving to the specific goals that I have for an assignment. For example, if my students are writing a lab report, we might be focusing on writing a really good hypothesis this month. And so maybe I ask the feedback to be focused on just the hypothesis. If you're teaching in an area that has lots of writing, like English language arts, maybe there's a particular element of writing that you're focusing on right now, and you want the students to get feedback in that particular area. By asking the AI, by telling the AI what your focus is, you can get feedback examples that are better aligned to that. When I give students feedback on a project that has a rubric, and I know we were talking about the benefits of rubrics earlier, I always give the rubric to the AI and then ask it, what kinds of feedback could I give about this rubric? That way, the feedback that I'm giving to students is aligned perfectly with the goals of the assignment, specifically the different parts of the rubric. Now, this middle example is one that I think has a lot of potential. Sometimes when I'm about to give feedback on an assignment, I want to identify what are the most common mistakes or errors that students have made. And what I can do, whether it's digital work or on paper, is give samples of work to the AI. I usually remove their name so that I don't have any of that personal identifying information. I remove the names and I give the work to the AI and I say, here's the work my students did. Can you help me identify the most common errors? That helps me know before I even get into it what I'm going to be looking for. Because I'm sure this has happened to some of you before. Sometimes when I sit down to grade a lot of assignments, the first few will have no mistakes and I'll think, oh, we're doing great. And when I get to like the 15th one, I realize, oh, you know what? There's a mistake here that the first guy made as well. And now I have to go back and add a comment to the first assignment. If I know in advance what kinds of mistakes they made, I can make sure that I'm always addressing them from the very beginning. A third strategy that I like to use with my middle school students is actually getting them in a position where they can get feedback right away, directly from the AI. So let's dive into these three in a little bit more detail. First of all, as I mentioned, you can align your comments to exactly the focus that you have for your work by giving the rubric to the AI. Now, if it's not a digital assignment, like let's say they're making a poster and you gave them a paper rubric, one thing that AI tools are really good at doing is reading images. This has gotten a lot better in the last couple of years. You can simply snap a picture of your rubric, whether it's on paper or anywhere, and give that to the AI tool so that it knows how to focus on the same things that the project is focused on. One of my all-time favorite ways to generate feedback is to make what's called tiered comment banks. So for every topic, sort of like a rubric, I have a comment that I give to students that are above my expectations. I have a comment that I give to students that are at my expectations. And then I have a couple of comments for students who are struggling to meet expectations. That tiered grid sits on my screen as I'm grading, and I can copy and paste from whichever square matches what the student has done. That way, not every student is getting the same feedback. Now, what I would have done before I learned this practice is I would have given the same comment to every student that says, don't forget about these three things, even if they already did two of those three things well. This is a way to give students really personal feedback that they're going to act on because they know it's not generic feedback that everybody is getting. And then because our feedback needs to be actionable, it's helpful to ask the AI, what should the action steps be for particular issues that they're having? If a student is struggling to write a hypothesis, what should the action steps be that I give them? And then when you get ideas from the AI, you can phrase them in your own voice. You can pick out the ones that are going to work for you or your students or the time frame that you have. So that's about aligning comments to the goals of an assignment. Now let's talk about those identifying common errors. As I said before, AI is really good at analyzing data. And if you provide anonymized data about your student's performance on an assignment, you can get a preview of the categories of need you're going to have. So when you start to build your comment bank, you can make sure that you're covering all the categories where they need support. And if you give students numbers instead of names or ID numbers, these are just like random numbers, you can even ask the AI, where were the problem areas for student number 3? And then you know who student number 3 is, but the AI never knows. I rarely get to this level, but I do know, and Rob can attest to this, that Brisk can really help with this because you can actually nail down feedback for each student individually. And Rob, I hope that later on you'll share some of your experiences with Brisk. Awesome. But remember that when you're asking the AI to help you analyze the data, your judgment is always critical. You have to keep that human in the loop. Now, I mentioned student self-feedback, and I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about this. I oftentimes on lengthy projects will give my students access to a custom chatbot, a gem like the one I shared with you, that they can use to get feedback on their work early on. This is not at all taking the place of the feedback that I would give them when they turn it in, whether it be a draft or their final assignment. This is just a way for them to get early feedback. It's like peer feedback in a way. If you're in the early stages of a project and you don't want students to waste time going down the wrong path, why not give them access to a tool where they can ask it questions and get feedback to improve their work before it gets too far down the wrong road, down a dead end? One advantage is that it's always going to be available, and not just 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because I love fielding questions from my students at like 10 p.m., but I don't love finding a bunch of emails from students in the morning that they sent me at like midnight. I'd rather not even know that they're awake and not asleep when they should be sleeping. But I also mean always available within a class period. I said before, I have 35 kids in one of my classes, and I can't be everywhere at once. And when there's 15 hands in the air, I feel guilty that it's taking me 5 or 10 minutes to get to some of those students. If they have access to a tool like this, they can do great things to get that feedback in the moment when they need it. And Sarah, I love that you mentioned Snorkl. We're going to talk about Snorkl later on. And if you've got some personal experiences, I'd love to hear those as well. It's also, this is one of those advantages that I think a lot of people don't realize. We know our students are using AI to cheat, right? Why not use this as an opportunity to show them the right way to use AI, right? The way that they could use AI to enhance their learning rather than replace it. Any chance I have to let my students use AI in a way that's ethical and appropriate, I'm going to give them that chance, because I want them to understand that this is not a tool to avoid at all costs. It's a tool that has to be used in the right ways. And so I do all this by giving them structured prompts. That means a prompt that I want them to type in or modify, or by giving them custom chatbots. Let's take a look at one of these. So one of the big projects I use with my students in 8th grade at the end of our chemistry unit is an opportunity for them to do a chemical reaction and demonstrate it as part of a presentation in front of our 6th graders. It's one of the school-wide projects that's a big hit. 8th graders love doing it for 6th graders. 6th graders enjoy being the participants, and then they look forward to being the ones doing the presentations when they come to 8th grade. So these presentations involve a trifold that they decorate with information and pictures, and then there's some kind of hands-on demonstration or experiment that they do with the 6th graders. Lots of different components completed over lots of time. We're talking weeks that students work on this off and on. So what I do is I open up Gemini and I create a custom gem, one of these custom chatbots. I feed it all the information I have about the project. So this is a screenshot of what my Canvas page looks like in my course that has links to documents. I feed all those documents into the gem so that the gem sees everything that I know about the project. And by the way, that also includes giving the gem pictures of finished products that students have turned in the past. I make sure that the gem also gets a copy of the rubric so that it knows how I'm going to be grading that project. And I feed all of that into the gem interface. Now, before, I had some folks asking me, what does it look like to create a gem? I know this is small print on the screen, so that's why we're going to talk about it more later. But in essence, what a gem is you taking part of the prompt that you would ask Gemini or ChatGPT and hardwiring that into the gem so that the students don't have to enter that part. The students are not going to have to enter the rubric or the pictures or the description of the project. All they have to feed into the gem is a picture of their work or a description of the work they've done so far. They can copy and paste in text that they're working on writing, and the gem is going to give them focused feedback based on how I would grade the project when it's done. You can tell the gem what kind of tone or personality you want it to have. You can tell it what role or what expertise you want it to have. This is a really powerful tool, and I use gems in a lot of things in my classroom with my 8th graders, but giving students early feedback on their work is one of my favorites. They'll come back to me and say, the gem did a bad job. It told me I didn't do this or I didn't do that. And I'll say, well, did you do those things? And they'll say, yeah. And I'm like, well, That's a point for you and a point away from the AI. And now you know not to rely on the AI for everything, right? So that's an example of students interacting directly with the AI to get feedback. Now let's talk about some of these education-specific tools that we've been hinting about. I'm going to start by talking about Brisk, and I'm actually not going to do the talking because I have very limited experience using Brisk myself. Rob, if you wouldn't mind unmuting and telling us about your experiences, and anybody else who's used Brisk, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul. Brisk is a fantastic educational tool that kind of syncopates with the Google Classroom that I'm using right now. I'm able to create assignment posts where students upload their work into the assignment post, and I utilize the Sidebot, the Brisk tool, to upload my rubric, give it parameters of comments, a certain focus on, do I want to focus on connotation or formatting or making strong summary statements. And it does a very good job uh, pulling it in. There are some hiccups here and there with formatting that I see with the italicized. Is the endnote citation correct here and there? So I have to correct it here and there. But I really, I'm able to get an overview of what I'm about to look at, really scan the work and copy and paste certain elements of that feedback that I would like within the comment section or their work itself. So it's a very powerful tool. I'm able to get through about 150 of these comment feedbacks a day in a grading session.
That's awesome. For those of you that haven't used it, Brisk works as a Google Chrome add-on, right? Is that fair to say, Rob? And
Yes, it
so
does.
you basically invoke it and it can see what's on your screen and interact with it. One of the other things I've done with it is you can upload groups, like whole folders of feedback that might even be student work that might be living in your Google Drive, or even images of student work. So if you're a math teacher and having a Google Doc of work is not as easy, you can use handwritten work, photograph it all, upload it to Brisk, and it can create customized, personalized feedback for each student. Yeah. Has anybody else had experience with Brisk that would like to share? Awesome. Then I'm going to talk about Magic School really briefly. In the chat, let me know if you've used Magic School yourself. With Magic School, I'm also going to talk about School AI because they're very similar. What these two tools do is they take a chatbot like ChatGPT and they create a whole bunch of custom chatbots for you that are designed for specific teaching purposes. That includes giving feedback. It also includes writing IEPs and sending emails to parents and all that. Both of these tools are free for teachers. If you sign up, you can go in and look at the toolbox of options they have in front of them. Now, I am a big fan of using chatbots, things like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, because you're getting at like the full sort of full power of the AI directly. What these tools do is they kind of put a little skin on that lets you, a wrapper they call it, that lets you interact with the AI in a very focused way. It is a lot like building a gem, or ChatGPT calls them custom GPTs, but it's a similar thing. So definitely explore those. They both have feedback tools that you might find useful. And the last one I want to mention is Snorkl, which again, I have not used all that much. So Sarah, you mentioned that you had used it. I would love if you would share either in the chat or by unmuting your experiences with Snorkl.
I think, Paul, she may have actually like dropped. I think she may have lost her connection.
Okay.
Of course.
Well, I will tell you from my own experience, what Snorkl does is it acts in much the same way that Brisk does, except that it's a separate app that you use. And it can basically give kids feedback either directly or through you choosing which feedback you want to give them. It provides an interface that's really cool where kids can submit work directly to it, even handwritten work through images. You can give them a handout. They can provide their work there and get immediate feedback from Snorkl. So it's definitely worth trying out. Again, I'm kind of a fan of chatbots rather than these specialized tools, but these specialized tools do simplify the work quite a bit, so I can understand the desire to use them. All right. With that, we're going to begin to wrap things up. So now that we've had all these conversations about what good feedback looks like, why it's so important, how AI can help it happen, I would love for you to tell me in the chat with an emoji or a word or a sentence, how confident do you feel at this point about using AI tools to enhance your feedback? Shannon gives me a thumbs up and the mind blown. That's the greatest compliment I could get. Thank you. Thank you, Shelley. I'm glad to hear that it's inspired some folks to go out and play around with these tools. Vasi, same with you. That's my goal, not to necessarily answer all your questions, but to have you leave with enough questions that you want to go play with these tools. Thank you. Thank you all for this part. I'm going to go ahead and close up so we have a few minutes for questions and answers if you have them. If you're interested in knowing more about how AI prompts can help make your job a little bit easier, maybe even more effective, please check out my book, 50 AI Prompts for Teachers. It's been out about a year. The thing I'm most proud about is that it's written in a way that it's really a book about good teaching. And the prompts that are in there hold up even a year and a half later as the AI tools have changed. Because the truth is there are some universal practices out there that are really effective. If you enjoyed this session of Not Your Average PD, I hope that you'll go to the website there and the one in the chat to sign up for our next session, which is also AI related. It comes to you from the amazing Dr. Keith Burgess, who's going to talk to you about some other ways that you can use AI to improve and empower your teaching practice. Biggest thing I'm going to ask you to do, thank you, Rob. The biggest thing I'm going to ask you to do is to use the link in the chat for feedback or scan that QR code. Like all of us here at the Kenan Fellows program, I thrive on feedback, right? I want to get better. And the best way I can improve and the way we can improve these Not Your Average PD sessions is by finding out from you what worked well for you, what could be better. You will not hurt my feelings if you give me feedback about how I can improve. Even if it's AI generated, I'll take it. And with that, I will say thank you all for your time, and feel free to hang out for a few minutes if you've got specific questions you'd like to ask. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your year.
It's very meta of you to do feedback for a feedback session. I love that. Thank you all again for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. Like Paul said, if you have questions, we'll hang out for a few more minutes. I'll go ahead and turn off the recording.